here we are. It's the Geordie Journos again. And it's another special with the main man, Keith Patterson. How are you doing tonight, Keith?
I'm great. I just got in time. I thought I was going to be late, but and I was particularly pleased it was at 8 o'clock because that's like a downtime for me. But I've been flat out since 6 o'clock this morning, and keen to get on and just cover everything and get it off my chest, and then let people understand what's happening.
As ever, I think any regular Geordie Journos watchers, anybody who follows Keith NCSL on Twitter will know he's the man with the answers. And there seems to be a lot of questions at the moment with regards APT rules, implications on PSR, implications on Premier League rules, implications on Manchester City's immediate future, and what that could really mean for Newcastle United. And I think everybody out there, I know, Keith, you've been inundated with messages from people wanting to know what is going on and what does this really mean. So I'm going to leave it over to you after, very quickly. I'm going to quickly do this at the top of the show, Keith, so keep that in mind. I do want to make sure I check the comments, everybody who is on here watching. But you'll notice I'm in a T-shirt. What is all this about? Geordie Journos T-shirt. So we're launching today a special merch range. Take the mic if you like, but it's top class, genuinely. It is really good quality that I've got on here. You can get your mugs. I've got one here just for me. My cup of coffee for the night. Double-sided, look at that. Top class. Get your mugs, get your anything you like. Check out. The link has been kindly put in there by the man in the background tonight, which is Dominic Skur, one of the other Geordie Journos. So do check out the comments on this video and you can see all of your Geordie Journos merch. If you want to support the lads, including myself, then do take a look and you might just find something nice for Christmas. Quick word for our sponsors as well. Four Rivers Financial Planning. All Geordie Journos videos are sponsored by them. Any holistic financial advice that you guys need, they are on the screen. Any holistic financial advice, do jump on there and check them out. They might even be able to answer a question or two on APT and PSR, although I'm pretty sure Charlie won't be the happiest man alive when I'm saying that kind of thing live on air. Right. Keith, over to you, mate.
Before I go any further, I know somebody else wants to sponsor you as well, so you'll see that start to move soon. But lots of people have been in touch with me over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and this has led me to make inquiries, to pick the phone up, to talk to lawyers, and to try and get a take on what's going on in the big world of football. What's happening with the 4 clubs? What's happening with this vote we apparently lost? And where does it leave us? So what I want to do is try and put some structure to it so I don't lose people off. By all means, put in the chat if I'm going through it too quickly, and you slow us down, by all means, Liam. But let's go back to what's happened, and I think if we do what's happened, we'll be able to understand the past position. Then we'll go to where does it leave us today, and where can it take us tomorrow. So in a nutshell, what happened? Can we say jointly? You can put up on screen that a letter was sent out on behalf of, let's say, 10 clubs. It was written just after the takeover of Newcastle, and that letter was calling out for what became known as the Newcastle rules. And if you read the right-hand side of the letter, it stresses that the people in no uncertain terms will drop what they're doing and are going to go after Newcastle, in short. And that's why it became known as the Newcastle rules. So you take that off now. In doing that, when you join together in a competition and you side or you whisper or write or lobby, it's illegal. Okay, so 5 paint manufacturers can't lobby or legislate against one paint manufacturer. It's just not allowed. Whatever industry you're in, Nike and Adidas cannot team up against Gola and stop people selling or buying their goods. You can't even chat about how you could beat another competitor. The competition is about individual parties, and you've got to be alone in that competition fighting against all your other competitors. So they made the Premier League competitive. You've got to have each club fighting for themselves against the other 19. And that's how competition law works. It's not just in the UK, it works in the EU as well. And anybody dealing in any business of the turnovers that these companies are doing will be more than well aware of the penalties if you breach that. So what they did was they did something, and they asked for a meeting, and they came together, and it was all against one club. That's what you've got to remember. And that one club was not invited to a meeting where the other 19 parties attended. That too was not anti-competitive as well.
Keith, can I just say, like, that's one thing that almost gets brushed over sometimes, but there is a real significance to that, isn't there? That there was collusion among other clubs without even bringing a certain club to the table. It can't really be overstated.
That's a great point, and that's what you've got to do, is you've got to keep pulling me back, because my weakness and my fault is I'll talk as though everybody understands how anti-competitive it is because of the career I've had and some of the work I've done. So when somebody colludes, that means I'm going to keep going back to layman's terms tonight, and I'll talk about bullies and things like that. But when somebody colludes, it is naughtily talking about a competitor in a way you shouldn't. So if you're colluding, you're plotting and planning deviously to gain advantage or to gain to further your business against theirs. When 10 clubs come together and one of the executives sends a letter, how did that letter come about? How did he decide that 6, 7, 8? But I think he quoted 10 other clubs were with him on that. So to do that, he must have colluded. They must have discussed it. They must have discussed the takeover of Newcastle. They must have discussed the implications of a Saudi-controlled football club in the Premier League. And there must have been objection to that. So they must have agreed, there's no court in the land's going to say, you must have agreed that you all wanted to send this letter. So you were colluding. You were joining together to the detriment of one single party. Now, that party was Newcastle. And if you wanted to keep it relatively kosher, you could have, and I'll use words like that, you could have invited Newcastle along to listen. But the fact you had the meeting about Newcastle, and 19 years were present and one wasn't, you've removed any doubt. Even if there was 2 of you there and it was about Newcastle, that would be illegal. But if you have 19 there and they miss Newcastle out, the Premier League made a major own goal. What they should have done is they should have said that you couldn't do that, and that would be anti-competitive, and it would be unfair to that party involved. To go ahead with the meeting, one club in there who I would say is Newcastle's main ally, and I was told this during the takeover, and I was told when I was having a pop at the Big Six of old that Man City were embarrassed by what was going on, and they were on our side, and they were keen for the takeover to go through. So I think they've remained our ally for over 3 years. And I was told this nearly 4 years ago when I was doing what I did. Man City made a comment in the Premier League when they made a comment back then, and then when rules were passed, which were the Newcastle rules, Man City said that they had to change them. They said that they weren't comfortable with the rules. And you'll see when they tried to change the rules again, and I would say put them on steroids, when they changed them early in the year, Man City said, if you don't change those rules, we will take a competition action against you. That's what they said to the Premier League. Now that's massive, because people ask, why did Man City do it, not Newcastle? Well, Newcastle had no evidence. How would Newcastle have firm and fact evidence when they weren't in the meeting? They could guess or say, we understand or we think. And then they're on what's called a fishing exercise. And when you do a fishing exercise in law, you've got to state and you've got to put front what you're relying on. So you get some of it from disclosure, but you can't take a court case on what you think might have happened or you think might have been said. To fight any court case, you need evidence. Man City would have the evidence because they were in the meeting. They know what was discussed, what was passed, and how these letters came about. and they said they would take an action, and ultimately that action would take time to build. So the action was threatened at the start of this year. Man City were in the middle of a major case, which is the 115 charges. So Man City were fighting a much bigger case in their eyes, because this would have made them more profitable if they won APT, but 115 would make them exist. And if all the 115 charges went against them, the aim of, let's call them the Red Cartel, because we'll just use that name tonight, is what's become known as on social media. Those people that are determined to hang on to all this financial privilege, it seems, were determined to relegate Man City and take Man City away from winning 4 titles. So everybody knows what's going on out in the world. When Man City were in the middle of fighting 115 charges, they stopped and used the exact same team, which was Lord Panic, and the same legal team, and he fought an APT case. So the first thing we've got to ask ourselves is, why did Man City do it? A lot of Newcastle fans will say, why is Newcastle not doing it? And I've explained, because we wouldn't have the evidence. We weren't party to it. And Newcastle would have been a very interested listener. And no doubt they were collecting and gathering evidence at a rate of knots. But Newcastle would turn around at that point and say, bring it on, let's watch what happens. And I'm sure the Newcastle team, the executive team now, have got infinitely more evidence than what they had before the APT case comes. But what was said was that if Man City take this case on, they will dilute their effort to defend the 115 charges. That's quite obvious, isn't it? Because if Lord Panic's fighting 115 charges, which is a mammoth thing to do, which is said could relegate them more than one division, I'm not convinced, but it is a big case. I don't think they'll get away with everything. By the same time, I don't think they'll fail on everything either. But if you put your legal team through that, and at the same time get to take the Premier League on an associated party transaction case, you are being very harsh on your legal team, and you're certainly stretching them, is the least you could describe it. So to do that, you've got to then ask why Man City did it. And the answer to that is very clear. All the lawyers I've spoken to said the same. They must have felt it worthwhile. They must have felt there was benefit to be derived from the APT case that would enhance or improve the 115 charges. Okay? So let's fast forward the tape a little bit, and let's say, what was their reward? What did they get out of dissolving their legal team or stretching them to the point of running 2 cases at once? And the reward was probably put in a paragraph. It was the fact that they proved that the people that were charging them for 115 charges and the people that were suggesting that Man City acted inappropriately, they proved that those people were anti-competitive, which is massive. Anti-competitive when you're running a competition. Think about it. You're running a competition and you're anti-competitive. Well, one contradicts the other, because you run a competition to get a competition winner, and you run a competition to make it competitive. And if you're anti-competitive and you're running it, God help everybody. Then they proved they're unlawful. So you can either do things legally and lawfully, which is one and the same thing, or you can do it illegally and unlawfully. And then chuck something else in, because they're the biggest, they're the people who run it, they're the governing body. So what did they then do? They proved that they would abuse their position of dominance. Now think of that. That means they will get numbers to gang up. 14 votes to 6. The whole ethos of the Premier League is being brought into question, because when somebody steps across them, they have been proven by 3 judges that they will abuse their dominant position. And as the regulator, obviously they're not the legal regulator, because that's coming from government now, but as the governing body, the people who all 20 members look up to, they will abuse their dominant position. Put that in layman's terms, which I'll do a lot tonight, because this is all about just one fan's perspective on it, and what I am is just a football fan. So put that into layman's terms, which is how I like to talk. And what they're saying is that we'll get more clubs to gang up against you than you've got. So they've just got 16 clubs to gang up against 4, and they think that's a win. We'll look into that in a few minutes. We'll see whether it was a win or not, because I'm staggered that you've got Mattams jumping around at the minute saying we lost a case, and people thinking that they won a case. We'll look into that, and then you decide at the end whether anybody won or not. But I think what the Premier League ultimately did was Man City took them through the Premier League's preferred route, which is arbitration. It's the only route for clubs. And they showed they were bullying clubs. There's a lot more clubs who testify that they feel bullied over the last few years.
Well, I was gonna jump on there, Keith. Sorry, and say is there'll be a lot of people out there maybe in the last 18 months, 2-3 years even might have lost a little bit of faith in the game itself. Do you feel some of that as well? Because like you said, you point to go back, maybe roll you back 3 or 4 minutes. You said a competition by nature is there to be fair. It's a fair competition that anybody can win. There's been a sense, whether it's been noise, whether it's been true or not, there's been a sense, I think, in football over the last few years that almost the cards haven't been dealt right. There is an unfairness to the game because of the way the rules are set up. Do you kind of tend to agree with that? Have you lost any faith in that? Because I think there'll be people watching this program now who will have lost faith in football and think the game is rigged. Newcastle United will never do what they should be capable of for the owners that they have.
Have I lost faith? I was the only person I knew who ever thought the takeover was going to go through. So every single person I associated with thought I was crackers, and that includes you and everybody else. Everyone thought I'd lost the plot, but I felt the takeover was going through because I knew that on competition law, just on the evidence I had in my own possession, that I could win the competition action against the Premier League. So I didn't doubt at all. The day that it went into the CAT case, and the day that ran, I told everyone, I says, just get your cans out because we've got the takeover, it's through. And I met you on the day of the takeover, Lee. I'm outside the ground, tea time. I phoned you mid-afternoon and said, look, it's getting announced this afternoon. Let's get up there for when it gets announced. So we got up there a couple of hours before it was announced, but we knew what was going to come, and I knew sort of days earlier what was coming. With this, I don't know, because when I did the takeover, I was working with Newcastle United's sellers, and these are now the buyers. And so if you ask me who runs Newcastle United now, I don't know is the answer. And I'll cover that later, because I think that's quite key to where we go forward in the future. The structure that was put in place when PIF took over has changed. People's left, and there's been illness in some of the key executives. So I don't really know who's running it. You know who some of the key players are, but you don't know who's carrying the final say. If at the end of tonight, somebody knew who was running it, and they said to them, look, you've got an absolute surefire way to win this, and it can be done by doing this, that, and the other, and I'll show you, we'll show you snippets of what people said tonight on screen. I think it's game, set, and match. I think there's a specific target out there which the Premier League and the people who's been referred to as the Red Cartel rely upon and need. And if that disappears, they lose all their financial preference. So I think that I have no less faith in that it can be overturned and beaten. That's as clear as us getting our takeover. But I'm sat here the night after West Ham game, and I sat at the game last night, and I just thought there's going to be more of these. because we can't truly compete. And I'll come under that. I think in due course I'll come under it. I'll come under a comment that Aston Villa supporter said this week, which is very relevant. But if it remains as it is, and if it remains where Tottenham and Man United can go $500 million in debt and spend whatever they fancy spending, and it seems as though if they've got to breach your rules, it seems as though allowances are given for takeovers and allowances are given for a whole host of things. The suggestions being put on social media that Man United's been given a lot of allowances, to their takeover and their investment by Ineos or by Ratcliffe, whoever's got the shares. They're saying that there's been allowances given for that. They're saying there's allowances, that aren't in keeping with other people. But I mean, the Premier League are going after Leicester until DeMarco and push them back. And the whole thing, this whole voting that's gone on, this vote that's took part this week, is being deliberately done in a certain way, and I think a lot of fans don't understand. I mean, some asking me last night at the match, why was there only 4 people objected? I want to answer that tonight. I want to tell you why there's only 4 and tell you which ones clearly would have supported. Because Man City and Newcastle only needed 7 votes, and they had 6 absolutely nailed onto the mast. And as soon as we show you some things tonight, we'll show you who was never going to vote. But I think we've got to slow it all down and say that there'll be more West Ham games and there'll be more Brighton games where we couldn't break down a team that was struggling on the road. They were really struggling. They came with one plan, and that was to bog our midfield down. Like they just seemed as though they wanted to close down our midfield. In a team that's going to win something, or a team that's going to compete at the top, you would change that tactic and you would bring people on that could change the shape of the game. But that's what Newcastle seem capable of doing, and that's what seems as though when we bring people on, we bring in people on that wouldn't get into Liverpool's side, that wouldn't get into Man City's side. And there's one thing certainly, if you look at if you just look at the highest transfer fees on Man United's 11. I saw one last week where their highest transfer fees was 750 million, and they played Ipswich with their highest cost of 11 players was 150 million. So it's 5 times more, and you can almost guarantee yourself that Ipswich will be more challenged with PSR next season than what Man United will be, and how can that be right? How can it be fair? And put more or less, how can it be competitive? And so for me, I don't ever lose faith. I'm ever the optimist. And whenever there's a way that things can be done, I can relax. So if Newcastle, Man City don't want to go down the route of securing this and beating it and overturning it, and then fair play, because they're the biggest winners out of all this. It's not Liam Kennedy or Keith Patterson. We just fans. We're going to get some pleasure out of watching it. But these people, if they take the necessary action, will make billions, and that is what it's all about. But I'm not losing faith in whether it's capable, Liam. But what I am losing faith in is whether or not anything will be done, and that's what tonight is about. There's a question at the end: is whether and people can go and ask the clubs, are you going to do this or are you not? Are you going to sit there? Are you going to be like 7 or 8 of those 16 that voted who just want to exist? And people criticise, say, when we were under Mike Ashley, we just existed. There was no investment, and all they wanted to do was just exist and stay in the league, not get relegated. Well, we'll soon find out whether that is the aim of the Man Cities, the Villas, the Forests, the Newcastles. Because if those 4 clubs want to change things, they definitely can. And it's a relatively straightforward. I think it's something that can be done in less than a year. But it'll take club intervention. It'll take it on a high level. So moving on, what happens next? So that Man City, if you like, ran that action to gain knowledge that somebody was acting unlawfully, and they wanted to gain. They wanted people to see that whilst they're being charged for 115 charges, they're working with people that will bully, that will act anti-competitively, and will be unlawful when needs must, really. So that's what it is. So what happens next? Well, the next thing that happened was neither Manchester City nor the EPL knew exactly what the panel meant by their judgment. They didn't really know what the judgment meant. That gives you...
Well, that's quite normal, isn't it? I mean, it would be normal in something of this size and stature that the complexities of it would take some time to work out. It's not the kind of thing that there is a definitive, clear answer for either side, really. It would take some consideration to know who's really won or lost out of the rulings. When
people write a judgment, they normally write it in such a way that isn't re-challenged. That's how judgments are often written, but often that judgment needs explanation. And so when the judgment was made, Manchester City used, and we're not talking about small fry, we're talking about some of the most successful barristers, they're called King's Counsel or Silks, and they use some of the most successful in the world to argue, and it's quite a substantive legal argument, that if something is unlawful, it can't just have a few words changed to make it lawful, because sometimes it's lawful with intent. So you can't change words. If your intention is to do something, a couple of words doesn't make it right. So Man City wrote to everybody, and they threatened that there'd be more litigation. So immediately, encouraged by the clubs who would lose most, or the clubs with the biggest financial benefit, they put stuff out in the press saying, oh, there's City again doing more. And there was a lot of criticism of Man City for doing that. But Man City were deathly serious, because remember, they weren't just fighting for APT. They were trying to fight the organisation that's fighting them to rub them off. Now, what's Man City's crime? Man City's crime is they've won the title 4 times consecutively. So if they've won the title that many times and people haven't won the title, that's going to upset people. That's going to take a lot of coffers out of those kitties at these clubs. And what Man City was saying is, we still think it's unlawful. So what we'll do is we'll ask the panel to explain themselves. At the same time, the EPL said, no, we want to meet next week. So literally it got passed, and the decision was announced in the public Wednesday, Thursday of one week, and the EPL were trying to get a meeting for the following Monday, Tuesday to get a vote. So what were they going to vote on? You tell me what they're going to vote on. You're going to vote on some rules that haven't been explained. So eventually, after some to and fro, and after one of the leading counsel for Man City come forward, he said, if you go ahead with that vote, we will take litigation again. And he threatened the clubs as well. They wrote all the clubs and said, don't vote because you might be voting on something unlawful. So in the meantime, the EPL solicitors worked through the night and hashed the rules and all the bits. Imagine going through an exam paper and you get 17 out of 20. You immediately go to the 3 with the crosses on. You say, right, that one, and that one. You pull those 3 out and you say, rewrite them. Everything else is all right. And you've acted unlawfully, you've abused your dominance, and you've been anti-competitive. But we'll just change the wording and then we'll get it through. So people use a word for this, and they say when someone's being belligerent, they are doing what they want to do, and they won't seem to change no matter what anybody says. They're going to just keep crashing on. And it seems the words I heard was that Man City needed a win. Bear in mind they've been beaten a couple of times, APT, they've been beaten off Leicester, and they start to lose more than they're winning, and they wanted to win regardless of what that win meant. Even if that win meant the whole thing they were voting on was unlawful, they still needed a win. And they didn't stop there neither. They went and used a very clever tactic, and this might answer the guy I was talking to last night. He said, why did only 4 vote? And what they did was they agreed a vote that would not penalise the people who'd had all the benefit from the interest-free loans. So if you put that up, Kieran Maguire, I think, did a great chart on that, Liam. I don't know if you've got it, but if you put that on the screen, it shows you which clubs, we'll stick these specs on to read this, but you look at Everton, of 451 million of interest-free loans, Brighton, Arsenal, Chelsea, and Chelsea's got, what, 150 million of interest-free loans. Liverpool, Leicester, you might 132 million in loans. So let's just there's Wolves in at 65, Palace in at 80, Brentford, Forest in at 61, and Forest in 61 million of interest-free loans, yet they still voted against it. But what happened was, the rumour on the street was that Chelsea and Everton were very much behind the vote, and they wanted one more. So looking at that, I would have said it would have been easy to get Chelsea, Everton, and Leicester. But not if they're going to pay back. No, it's not a case of paying back the interest on those loans. It's a case that their PSR would have been harmed on the next round for whatever interest they put through. So whatever interest was accumulated, they were going to make a charge again on the next PSR. I mean,
Keith, can I just stop you there for a second? So again, I'm going to come to this very much from a layman's terms. We've seen a lot of talk, particularly in the media, and I'm no financial expert. I'll never claim to be, never have done, never will. A lot of talk about that. Just the narrative was it'll just get converted. We've seen a lot of that. It'll just get converted into shares or whatever it may be. Can you shine a little bit of a light on what that means to a normal person who doesn't understand?
I will. So three, not one, three High Court judges, the best you're going to get. So the three judges were supposed to be extremely top of the game. And they voted that whole behaviour of allowing somebody to put in interest-free loans, and when you see the charges at the bottom, zero. And then Newcastle and Man United both had zero interest-free loans. So when they get theirs, they would have had X% of interest. So whatever the going rate was, like if you get a car, you buy a house, you pay a rate of interest. So on all the loans, so if Everton's had £450 million worth of loans, they've got zero interest on. Newcastle's 450 million would have interest at whatever the going rate was, 5%, 7%, 8%. Some of them were in double-digit percentages, some of the percentages that people were paying. So that club who's paid interest is that much worse off than the people who get it for free. But their directors were putting it through to make the club have a better advantage. The problem comes when it's been noticed by some judges. They say, hell, that's anti-competitive, that. So that when it's anti-competitive, it's unlawful, it's illegal. And some people got hundreds of millions in there. So there's two ways to deal with it. One way is you could say, well, this needs to be dealt with. And we've got to deal with this in such a way that all of those advantages come back and evens the playing field. Or you could ignore it all and say, look, we'll write it off. We'll let you convert it into shares. We'll let you convert it into shares. Zero penalty to the club. Newcastle never catch up and never get penalised. That's one way of looking at it. And what the Premier League did, and again, this is what we told, because I wasn't at the meeting, but told from the decent sources, that the Premier League said that if you vote on our new rehashed APT rules, we won't penalise you on the PSR for your interest-free loans. You tell me why Everton or Chelsea is going to vote in favour of Man City and Newcastle. It's impossible. And in fairness to Everton, Chelsea, Leicester, they had little choice. What they were doing is they were doing what everybody does in this league, and they were voting for self-interest. And they had no option not to do that. They had to vote for self-interest. So people ask why there's only 4 teams. I'm supposing next time I see you, you won't ask. You say, it's quite obvious now. And that chart that Liam put up gives you the good example of how many hundreds of millions some of them were in for. But the clubs who had zero benefit were massively behind them in monetary terms. And what the judges say is that is anti-competitive. That isn't allowed. You can't do anything anti-competitive in business in Great Britain. Simple as that. You're not allowed to do it. But they've done it. Now, how do you address it? Do you fix it, penalise them, get them, do you deduct that from their PSR, or do you ignore it? And what it seems, this is what I'm told from third parties, is that the Premier League have done a vote based on people saying, yeah, we agree with those APT rules. We disagree with Man City, Newcastle, Villa and Forest. And what we say is, we'll just forget about the anti-competitiveness. Well, that then supports Manchester City's argument that it still remains anti-competitive because they haven't dealt with the interest-free part of the agreement. There's no mention of it. So how can it be competitive? It was anti-competitive as ruled by judges. How does it then get competitive when they haven't done anything with it? And people are telling you that we've lost a vote, really. Let's go on from that. So
quickly before you do, Keith, I just want to remind everybody, if you've got a comment or you want to ask Keith a question, we will get round to all the questions. There's been plenty in the chat so far, so we'll move it on. We'll get your questions across to Keith if you do have any. Do make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe to everything. If you love what we do with the Geordie Journos, I've mentioned the shop. You can get it there, as I mentioned earlier on. It's in the comments. And also there's a thanks button as well if anybody wants to. We're just 3 journalists who have a job, but we do this as a hobby, really. And anything that ever comes into the channel does go back into the channel. So if you do have any want to donate or show your thanks for what we do with Geordie Journos, do click the button and donate if you can afford it, of course. Sorry to cut you short, Keith. I just want to make sure I get all the T's and C's in before we move on.
It's appropriate time for me to say, last time I was on here, a friend of mine who goes under the title of SMB, I think contacted me after the last show that I did with Liam them and donated the lads £100. And I just wanted to call him out because it was that, he's a great lad. He does never take any limelight, so I wouldn't ever compromise him. But he's at every match. I saw him last night. He's not far behind where I was sat, and he's just black and white through and through. But he's under the name of SMB, put a donation of 100 quid in, and that the show they got it like a few hundred quid in, and it was just surreal. It was, it allows them to do these shows, and for them to win it, they got national award recognition, got finalists of a major content award this week. It's just great to see the lads set up in a year and do what they've been doing. It's amazing. So just wanted to call him out. But I think when we look at the vote, say it was a nothing vote. So the vote didn't add to anything, and it counted for very, very little. But I think the EPL, even though they knew what could happen, they still felt it was a win, and I think they thought a win was important. But it tells you such a message in effect that why do I think it was nothing vote? Because what did they achieve? What did they achieve? I mean, let's dissect that. They alienated 4 clubs, so they now got 4 clubs gunning for them. They've got 4 clubs totally pissed off with what's been going on, and those clubs will be angry, and those clubs will know that they used an anti-competitive and unlawful set of rules about interest-free loans to get the vote passed. I mean, that shows your abuse and dominance in many people's eyes. So there's a lot of furor about that, but they disregarded the final decision of those 3 judges. So what do you think them judges are doing? They asked them for their opinion. They said that opinion would be forthcoming in less than 3 months. Man City said, let's wait till it comes through, and then let's vote on something that relates to the amended rules as agreed by the panel. But they said, no, let's vote before that comes through. So you're voting on something you don't even know what the panel's going to say. People say that's disrespectful. What if the panel brings a curveball in and says, well, you've missed this out? What happens then? Do they have a new vote? Because if the panel decides something which is critical, or if the panel say, you voted on those rules going through, 16 to 4 win, but you still haven't dealt with anti-competitive interest-free loans or whatever. I don't know what they're going to say. There's a lot of suspicion that the panel might come down on the Premier League side to smooth the water over. I don't know. But if it was claimed to be anti-competitive, how has it become competitive by ignoring it? How does anti-competitive rule suddenly become competitive by ignoring it? You tell me. I think it's impossible, but you tell me. And what penalty have they addressed to level the field if they deal with those amounts? Is it not abusing dominance by getting people to switch votes? It was clear that some people would have voted with, and so it's clear that some people supported Man City. Everton, one of them, they supported Man City during the APT. So is that not abusing your dominance by enticing them to clear off their interest-free loans to win their vote? Is that not abusing dominance? You tell me. Why is it a nothing vote? The main reason is because the vote or the rules have switched back to what they were pre-Newcastle rules. So these are the old APT rules pre the steroids they put on it, where they tried to close Newcastle down. So how have they won a vote if they've? Well, let's put it into layman's terms. They've been caught out by a panel on 3 major slaps on the wrist for trying it on, and now they've gone back to the original rules and reinstated them. How's that a win? I would say it's a slap in the face. I would say you've been caught out. Have you ever heard anyone use the expression, I'm so sorry for doing this? And somebody says, no, you're not sorry for doing it. You're just sorry you got caught. That's what this,
so that's the thing, isn't it, Keith? I think we've seen a lot of that. And there was a lot of, I'm not going to name names or really call people out. Look, everybody has their own sources and their own takes on anything that can happen. But there was a lot of national discourse jumped to the conclusion that because the Premier League began to rush these things through and certain things didn't change, that Man City had lost in this regard. But if you look at the whole thing in a wider context with a wider lens, as you mentioned, it is very obvious that, in my eyes, to get the Premier League to shift on anything shows that Manchester City did what they intended to do. Like, they intended to alter the course of the rules and change things for the betterment of most teams who want to be progressive. So they didn't lose. They effectively won by making any changes. And forcing the Premier League to even look at their own rules was a win, in a sense, really, wasn't it?
That's what I said to Martin this week. He was laughing. He says, oh, you can't spend all your money now. And I says, I don't know what you're on about. He said, well, you've lost. I says, well, lost what? You've lost your vote. You've been outvoted 16 to 4. That's put yours back in your box. You can't spend all your money. And I said, so they tried it on and tried a new set of rules that were found out to be illegal, and the judges made them go back to what was in place when our takeover happened. And you think we've lost a vote? Like, really? We've caught them at it. We've caught them with their hands in the tail, and we've slapped the wrist, locked the tail, and made them go backwards. Newcastle's won and got a massive amount of evidence while all this has been happening, but we haven't lost anything. Man City might have lost some money in fighting and proving it, but I think they've gained an awful lot for the 115 to show the nature of the beast that they're up against. And I think they've showed the whole the British public about the nature of the beast they're up against.
So I was going to say, let's move on a little bit because we've got a few. I know you've got lots and lots of points to get through. And actually, one thing that I would say is there's lots of comments coming in the comment section, and I would like to see if we can get onto those a little bit later on. So
no problem. So where do we go to next? So with regards to the APT, it depends on the points I've just raised. It depends about. We need Newcastle to go and get loads of sponsors. That's what we need to do, regardless of anybody. Just go and get sponsors. And yes, you're going to have the chew that you're going to have last season, but in the same way that you got Adidas through, in the same way as you got all the other shirt sponsors, just go and do it. Just line your sponsors up, get them in, and do it. When we get more sponsors, we grow our PSR. But brings us on to the next point. What is utopia? What would utopia look like? And many people would turn around and say that utopia, if in Newcastle, would be to spend as much as you want on anything you want. And I think that's understandable. There's a lot of people just saying, I'd like to buy all the best players. I'd like to, go and buy all Man United's best players. I'd go and like to buy everything because we've got more money. Others would say an even playing field is utopia, where everybody's even, everyone's equal, where the people they call the red cartel can't take an advantage. And that's where you people out there will have varying different opinions. Some people just want put a bond in a bank for 5 billion, and then you can go and spend 5 billion, and that's utopia. But some people say, I just wish, PSR was the same for everybody. I wish that. When you got the Champions League, you all got paid on how far you got, not really how well you've done for the last 20 years. So utopia for different people will mean different things. I was talking to a Villa fan this week, and he mentioned another Villa fan. He said, did you see what he put? He put it online, and what he said was, the world we live in now, I could see Villa winning the Champions League and then having to sell the best 2 players to comply at the end of the season. And that did the rounds on social media about this Villa fan saying that. And that's got to be wrong. That's got to be wrong, that if you go at the top and win the top competition that you compete in, you shouldn't have to sell to compete to stay afloat. You should be able to invest more to stay there. That's what you should be allowed to do. But in the same way it showed last year that there's a lot of dubious comments about people of what they did and how they got through PSR. But one thing's certain, the crosshairs were focused on Newcastle, and Newcastle had to go and do that deal with Forest and had to go and do that deal with Brighton, or Newcastle were in trouble. So we've got the same challenges in January, and no doubt we'll have the same challenges next summer, sorry. But this week I've seen Newcastle fans chatting and saying, I saw one today where a lad I know quite well said we need to sell a big player, and he said I think we need to sell Tonali or Bruno because they're both similar, and we need to sell one of them. And he was debating over which one he'd sell. Well, are you telling me there's not 2 people in Man City's midfield that's similar? Are you telling me that when De Bruyne comes off, they don't put on somebody you think either offers more or is different? Are you saying that Liverpool don't have 3 wingers? And that's what Newcastle don't have. That's why last night, when I looked and thought we couldn't break down an average West Ham side, and where, after an hour, I lost hope, and I just thought the players seem to lose faith in what they were doing, and it's because we don't have the depth. We just don't have the depth, and whilst it'd be great if everyone was the same standard as Newcastle and West Ham, the best men won. When you get into the squads, the Man Cities and Arsenal's and people that's got, they're beyond us. Those are beyond us. So going down for me, utopia is to compete, and my ideal world is where we compete on the pitch. Our stadium is big enough, and that competes. and the squad's big enough and it can compete. And I've heard people this week talk about saying that building a new stadium that would hold 70,000 fans would be a huge mistake. And when you check out, a lot of these people that saying that already have season tickets. A lot of people have season tickets already, and so they are right. But there's a lot of people who don't have tickets. There's a lot of people who can't get out of the money would dearly love to, and I don't hear them people sharing the same thought. But I heard things this week where people said, if you grow the stand or build a new stadium, you'll kill the atmosphere. Well, they must have been there last night, because you can't knock West Ham, with my favourite London team, and I have a lot of mates who are West Ham fans, and they tortured me on the way back on the phone, and they just said, "Where's your famous atmosphere?" And they were singing away, sang it in the ground, and it was poor last night. It started good. It started good with the display for Isaac. It was brilliant, and I was thinking, here we go. When Isaac got that goal, I thought it was in. I thought it was right in front. I thought that's a goal, and then you just wait for the thing to blow up. But at an hour in, after about an hour, Newcastle lost shape, they lost belief, and the fans went quiet, and it was a quiet thing. So how does the building the stadium do it? So I think the solution to all this, which people are trying to avoid, comes back to something called PSR. I think that if you don't have a stadium of 70,000+, you're not going to compete. That's what I think. And I say that from a person who's been in business all his life. How are you going to compete when the average Newcastle fan on a match day, the average attendee at a game, spends 1/4 of what a Chelsea fan spends? And I'm not saying that somebody who can't afford it needs to find money. What I'm saying is that we need a stadium that allows the man that can only afford to go once a month to get in. It allows kids, new fans, to get in, but also has plenty of space for boxes where people want to pay stupid money are allowed to pay stupid money so we can compete. And when I went to Tottenham's ground, the same goes there. It's a multiple of what we've got. And people I've heard this week about putting another 5,000 on the Gallagher end. The infrastructure at Newcastle, the whole ground and the stadium leaves that it all needs updating and renewing. And to do that,
Keith, sorry, I'm just about to go on a little bit of a tangent, and I'm aware we don't want to go on too many tangents this evening. However, I know what information I've got from certain sources, etc., would say 70 is too big. They would say 70 doesn't. You know yourself, a man of business. You've run many businesses and been involved in many businesses over the years in your time in your career. It's about supply and demand. If there's a ready supply of things, does the demand diminish or does it not? That's the argument that I've heard come from relative sources in and around the football club. What would you make of that? Is an abundance almost too much? Or would it not be an abundance? Because 70 seems big. It seems big to most people that would look at it. What would you say to that?
I had 52,000 there last night. And if you go to work, the guy I'm in business with, he wants season tickets, can't get them. Go to my brother, he wants season tickets, can't get them. I don't have a season ticket. I go to best friend, he hasn't got a ticket. I know umpteen people that buy multiple tickets, but the thing is, when you've got demand, you've got 52,000, you can't get it for love and the money. Where's the kids at? Where's the man who would go once a month? Where's you can't. The box situation. I think there's 300 on the wait list for boxes. So if you just put another 300 boxes on, how much does that make? So in terms of money, this is simple. Economy is simple. If you don't get a ground as big as Spurs and Arsenal, you'll never compete, because every single match day they go forward and forward and forward. You need all the sponsors that the Man Cities, the Liverpools, everything's got. You need all the match day revenues that you've got, and you need the money to be able to buy players. We don't pay close to the wages. So let's talk about wages. Last night, people say Lloyd Kelly lost his chance. He had his chance to get Dan Burns shirt. I heard it on Geordie Journos this morning when I was in the gym, and it says he missed his chance to get that. He's on 150,000 a week. That's 7.5 million a year, allegedly, for playing football. And they're saying he's not done it. So what kind of money do we need to compete? Because if you look at our centre halves, we need some help in there. We've got Botman, who's the true quality. And where's our next Botman coming at the right side of the back? We haven't got it. If you look at our goalkeepers, we've got 7. We haven't got keepers good enough to win us the league. And we need an out right winger who was born a right winger, it's just a right winger. We don't be switching people from their favourite position and put them off. So what I'm saying is all this takes money. It all takes money. It's all been stifled. PIF and the Rubens have got the same kind of money as Man City on their own. And Pip's got more than the rest of the league put together. But why can we not spend it? And we spend it because of rules. So if you want to talk about killing atmosphere, and you want to talk about what having 3,000 empty seats in a 70,000 stadium would do, I'll tell you, it all comes back to playing like you did against West Ham. If you want to kill atmosphere, play like you do against Brighton and West Ham. And I don't care if you have a 30,000 stadium, it'll go quiet. And noise. There's so many fans that's gone for years. People that's given the season tickets up at Ashley, dying to get back in that ground. Loads of people, people wanting tickets, crowds of people, groups of people, and they want to go in there and they want to shout all the time. I saw 4 kids interviewed last week. They're about 20-year-old. They didn't know, they were given photographs. Who was that? They didn't know who Les Ferdinand was. But they're getting in the ground. The history's getting sucked out. All the passion that was there, those people are dying to get in. And people saying, oh, we can't fill the stadium. How do you know that? What gives you the right to say with a 52,000 sell-out every single week that you can? Is there ever any seats available? If you put 5,000 tickets up for sale at Newcastle next week for any game, Brentford at home, anybody, Ipswich at home, do you not think they'd sell straight away across the world? So how can anybody say what the demand is? What you've got to do is you've got to get the money into the club, let Newcastle compete, and then build a stadium that's big enough to let people want to go. And if you bring a squad and bring people and bring tactics and start winning things, you'll get more games like PSG. But if you don't and you can't compete, your ground's 20,000 smaller than the people you think you compete, because you think they're going to compete with Arsenal. Everyone that you talk to say, oh, we can compete with Arsenal and Spurs. No, you can't off the pitch. Can't even get close. So if you can't compete with them stadiums, you're going to fall behind. And this is what's happening with the rules. At the minute, PIF and the Rubens can compete with anybody, but they're legally not being allowed to. That's the whole purpose of me saying what I'm saying. And I'm not. I love going to St James's, but equally, I know to move on and to compete at the highest level, we'll have to develop either St James's or a new stadium. That's a fact of life, or you'll get left behind.
Just sorry, Keith, before we move on that comment, yeah, I did say that. I did have my son there. It was his 11th birthday yesterday, and he was welling up in that second half. He was absolutely devastated with what he was seeing. But it was, you know, and I was gutted for him as well. But it was just nice to see passing that passion on down, because I was that little boy. I was that little boy once, and he was able to feel. And my daughter last night was devastated because we could only get 2 tickets. Sitting next to each other. My daughter's only 8. She was devastated that she couldn't go with me and her brother. We've got tickets for the Brentford game, so we're all going to be there at the Cup quarter final. But it's that feeling that it is, we need to build. There needs to be a building of the next generation. So when I was saying before, I was playing devil's advocate. I was sort of suggesting what people say. Is it too much? Is it not? For me, I would rather just be able to get a ticket. I don't really mind the economics of it all, whether it's supply, demand. You've got to have a scarcity almost to build that demand. I don't really care about any of that. And I think a lot of other people out there don't care about that either. They essentially just want to be able to get a ticket. And that's kind of where I come from. I think there are scores and scores of people with family members, friends, whatever, who know they would give their right arm to have a guarantee.
Without a doubt.
And going on to, before we move on, going on to the economic side of it, I'll hear people go, yeah, but Chelsea do it with a stadium size of X, Y, and Z, a lot less than St James's Park. Yes, but they've been untethered for years to spend and build squads and build a machine almost behind the scenes that can make money. Newcastle United are being prevented, or they're starting so far behind everybody else in that process. It might take them 20 years to get there. I don't think anybody wants to have to wait that long, but the way the rules are, that's what's having to happen at the moment. Right, Keith, I'm really aware of the time.
No.
Everyone needs to jump in, make comments. Keith.
We'll go through this. You've got to look at that ground and sit there and say that if you've got a ticket, then great. And if you're happy where you're sitting or you're happy being there, that's great. But you've also got to let other people come in, and you've got to, I'd like to see loads more kids getting in, because when we were younger, there was a lot more kids who went to the match. And there was a lot more families, that want to, yourself, Liam, like, how do you split your son and your daughter because they all want to go? So there's a lot more people where they have one ticket or two tickets, and they'd like four. But the thing is, it comes to capacity, and it's if there's 300 boxes on the waiting list, seriously, let's just say that's 30 grand a season. Put 3 more boxes on. Phenomenal money, phenomenal. And that's where we are. We are so far behind Spurs, Arsenal, Man United, Liverpool, and Chelsea. We drag so far behind them in that thing. So for me, and the other one I hear is I'm sick of hearing about PSR. Well, would you want it to go away? Because that is the thing that's strangling you. That's probably got more to do why we can't beat West Ham and Brighton and why we should be. And that's why we can't go and buy who we want to buy, because of PSR. That's why I'm saying to you is the things you do control in PSR, you control the fact of how many sponsors you get, and that's down to the club to go and get them. You also control how big your stadium is, and how like the talk, all these exercises. And to me, all these exercises where they go down to the staff, it's good to hear communications, but the people who make these decisions are the people who put the money in. The people who put the money into deciding. If people going down there and getting drunk on 6 pints and sit there going, well, we get involved asking our opinion. Shut up, man. They'll do what's the most commercially sensitive and commercially viable and the commercially successful. And honestly, if you think that writing a letter is going to change it, come on, keep it sensible, man. You need these owners to come forward now and say, right, this is our intention, this is where we're going to go, and I hope you all agree with it. That's what needs to happen, because it's becoming like a drag, just a way to find out where the hell and what the hell's happening. We 3 years in and we've not heard anything about developing training facilities or things. So from fans' point of view, we want to do that, but I think it would help PSR, but I think it's time that whoever's leading the club starts to tell us that. So going on now, I think if until our fans recognise the two things, we're going to be dragging behind for a long time. I mentioned competing earlier, and right now I think we're growing as a club, but I don't think we're truly competing. And in 2024. We've touched on APT. We've got an insight of what APT is all about. So if you ask any Newcastle fan, there's only one daft that we're yakking on about anti-competitive behaviour for 4 years. But now I'm in good company, because now when I go out and I'm in thing, people talk to me about competition law, and people come and talk to us and say, oh, does that mean this and does that? And everybody seems to be getting a grasp for the fact that we've been badly treated. I think people thought I was making up once over. But now I think people start to get it, and I think they start to believe that there is a cartel situation out there, and we'll go on and we'll talk about people. But the bigger picture in all this is we've had an insight to APT, but the bigger picture is PSR. APT would help us, no doubt, if we could just write whatever sponsorships we want. But that's never really as viable as it is unviable at the moment. You're never going to get the stage where you can just say, Aramco is going to stick $1 billion in, and Newcastle now can buy who they want. That is as unfair as what it is at the moment. But PSR is there, and until you break it, until you break PSR, until you change it, you remain where you are. And that's the sad news tonight, is that there'll be more games like West Ham where we should win, but we don't win, or what's happening, or and the reality is we're shuffling our pack and we're paying people who started left midfield, putting them right wing, and then we put the left wing on the right side, switching them, and who's gonna cover our left back because he's suspended? Who's Pope gets another hand injury? Who's going in there? Are we gonna? We fragile. We fragile because of injuries and everything else. So unless we can change or break PSR, I think we're going to be here for a long, long time. And I think you'll see more. We've had great games at Newcastle over the years when PSR didn't exist. Man United 5-0. But even in recent times, we've had PSG. And you look at that and think, well, there wasn't a better night. You know, it was just a great night in Tyneside. But everything clicked and everybody ran, and we had a team out, and they just played above themselves, and they managed to do it. But then when you get to Europe, you're getting caught out by teams like Milan, who I thought we could have beaten. And I just think that we're just squad thin. That's all I think it boils down to. So where to next? Where we'll go to next? Let's talk about what people are saying in the market, rather than just listen to me row it on. Let's look at people who's made the living in football, and look at folk who's either owned or managed or played the game. Let's see what they're saying. And first of all, we'll look at Simon Jordan. So he's looked at the PSR in Great Britain, and I don't know if you want to read them out, Liam, what he's saying. They've been hampered and hamstrung by not having the runway landscape that you could have at places like Blackburn, Man City, or Chelsea. And
I'll take it if you want, Keith. Legislation and the rules and the closing of certain clauses around APT, which is specifically brought in after the Newcastle purchase, have hampered the opportunity for Newcastle to do what Manchester City did, and certainly not what Chelsea did in 2003 with the arrival of Abramovich. They were able to spend a decent amount of money, has actually left them in a situation where they weren't financially compromised and could have a decent runway. Eddie Howe came in and turned them from a team that most people suggested would get relegated to a side everyone wanted to watch, and got in the Champions League.
And that's a guy who's owned a football club, and he's a big voice in football, and he's saying that PSR is wrong. And he said on one choice, he'd admit it. I thought it was there for financial regulation. It's not. It's there to protect people with financial privilege. And he said it needs scrapping. And that's Simon Jordan. Let's have a look at somebody else. Let's go to Gary Neville. This is a guy who supports a club who is instrumental in what's called the Red Cartel. And they have a financial advantage under PSR. And he's managed football clubs. He's played for club and country. What does he say?
So in this one, he's saying we're holding Newcastle United back, assuming the we means as in the league, the Premier League. Gary Neville demands Premier League rule change so Magpies can get to Manchester City's level. A remarkable comment from somebody who really is a direct rival of Newcastle United at the moment. From Manchester United.
Yeah, and in fairness, the lad supports Man United. I respect that, but he's saying Newcastle's never going to get to Man City level. So as much as we can go in there last night and shake our head and wondering if put Murphy on, will Murphy create 2 goals, and then Man City will just bring another gem out, and like the kind of people that Arsenal buy, the wages are beyond what we've been paying. The only time we've even got close to them wages is when we got a free transfer. There's been no salary, there's been no fee involved. But we just drop out when some of these clubs bid on players. We like to think we can stand toe-to-toe with them, but the reality is we can't. And what Gary Neville's saying is Newcastle should be allowed to compete at Man City's level. And I think that's massively true. Why should we not be? Who says? It's anti-competitive. Let's look at another one. We're on a run now. Let's do Graham Souness, captain his country, Scotland, played at the top level, and he managed Newcastle. And he's always been, in a lot of people's views, against Newcastle. Let's see what he says.
Well, in this piece in particular, he's been very clear that he thinks the rules, Newcastle United fans Newcastle United as a football club are being held back after enduring a difficult transfer window, talking about the fact that they were unable to sign anybody of significance, given that, as we all remember, the big deal that Newcastle United did in terms of size was Will Asula, which was a reserve striker for around 10 to 15 million pounds from Sheffield United, and the big free transfer of Lloyd Kelly from Bournemouth. Incredible summer for a team that's chasing Champions League when you think about it, really.
And that's where it's always going to be, unless you can challenge and break their apple in their crown is PSR. That's what's keeping them ahead of us. That's what we'll never get close to. But look at Geordie got himself, Alan Shearer. What's he say? You got one of him.
So Alan Shearer very much talking about something that Nick DeMarco was saying, and he discussed it here. He says, "I don't like the PSR rules. I've told you my feelings," when he was talking on the Rest is Football podcast. "I just think it's a restriction of trade when you can guarantee you've got that money and are profitable and sustainable, and you can put £1 billion in to an escrow and ensure that everything is right in the future, then I don't see why you shouldn't be allowed to challenge and buy players, particularly with the way it's run, the football club, being forced to sell their youngsters because it's more profitable and gives them a better financial gain going forward in the future. I just don't agree with those rules. We know why it was brought in, to safeguard clubs. I just don't agree with the rules that are there at the minute."
So, I mean, you can't get a big icon in these parts, but there's a man saying, yeah, it's brought in. I thought it disappeared there. It's been brought in to safeguard clubs. So was it brought in for the Buries of the world? You know, was it brought in when people like Portsmouth struggled? The reality is, it's not for any of them. It's there's something sad. And then you look at a club that's championed these rules, Arsenal, and then let's see what the director of Arsenal, who helped form the Premier League in 1992, David Dean, he put an article out this weekend. What did he say, Liam?
So when he's talking here, I think this is maybe from the Mail. Financial fair play is a bother because it's caused a lot of friction, told Sky Sports. In fact, I'd say havoc in the league itself. You've got litigation between the league and the club, and litigation between the clubs and the clubs. It's not healthy. You need a happy environment between all the clubs and the management. I'm afraid at the moment, with financial fair play as it is, it's a huge problem. If I had my way, I'd scrap it all together and start afresh. It needs a rethink.
So it's not just me just banging the drum. It's them. But the one person I've always sort of respected, and I know when I first started this battle, I think I was shouting about anti-competitive behaviour and cartels, and people thought I was probably been drinking or something. But it's if you think about it, it's daft lad from Durham, and 4 years later, there's so many people, so many credible Newcastle fans, and probably one of our greatest ever players, Alan Shearer, saying exactly the same. Gary Neville, Simon Jordan, Graham Souness, who people thought wasn't a big Newcastle supporter, saying the same. But now we get to the same point where all these pundits and all these football experts are saying, they put their reputations on the line. They're sticking their names next to articles and saying, this is wrong, it needs to go, it needs scrapping. But in my opinion, the number one sports law, Silk, one of the greatest legal representatives in football, Nick DeMarco, who I speak to, who I did work with at the club during the takeover. He's had his say, and I think when he has his say, it means so much more. So we'll read that one now because it's quite riveting.
So this is a tweet in relation to a Martin Samuel article written on November the 4th. As you might have read, you may not have read, I'm sure you can find it from the link here. Nick DeMarco commenting on that, which was obviously talking about PSR and why it's stopping the likes of Newcastle United progressing. Nick DeMarco said, having been involved in so many FFP PSR cases since this all started in England, going back to QPR in 2014, including having acted for Nottingham Forest in the case Martin discusses in this article, I have to say this is one of the most intelligent and thought-provoking critiques of the financial rules from any journalist I have read. I've never gone so far as to argue that no financial restraint rules are necessary, nor that the positive intention of the current rules is to hold certain clubs back, but that has been their effect. And despite what some have claimed, the evidence does not suggest they have advanced either financial sustainability or competitive balance. The contrary could be more easily made out.
It says, if you go down the bottom, there's a quotation on the bottom of that thing which you just missed out there. Just read the very bottom of it.
So, no, that was the full amount. That was
on
the
bottom. What PSR stops?
That's Martin Samuel's article quotes. What PSR stops at the likes of Forest, Brighton, or even Brentford getting too good, in Newcastle United, of course, particularly Newcastle. That's Martin Samuel speaking.
DeMarco's compliment Samuel, but he's saying it stops particularly Newcastle. So we've had the Newcastle rules. We've got PSR now that particularly stops Newcastle. And Samuel's never been a Newcastle supporter. He's never been a backer of what we do. But he put an article out. So you've got the top. You've had journalists where nobody's investigated nothing, and there's never been journalism where people, and I'm going to show you with journalists, but people focus on who's playing, who's injured, who's coming on, and people focus on what we did in the football field. But nobody's investigated what's happening behind the scenes and what's happening with legalities. And this show tonight looked at people like Gary Neville. You know, he's a voice now in football, and he's looked at Alan Shearer. But to look at Nick DeMarco, and when he says his last sentence was something like, it could be argued to the contrary. So let's put it in layman's terms. This is what Nick DeMarco's saying. What he says is stinks of shite. That's what he's saying. And it's unfair. Most importantly, and you should listen to these words, what Nick DeMarco said is this can be beaten. That's what he's saying. He's saying, I can beat it. Nick DeMarco said, saying that this article's really true, and it's really right what Samuel's written. And Samuel's saying it's particularly unfair to people. And DeMarco's saying, I could argue to the contrary, which means that in layman's terms, that's a lawyer saying I could win this case, I could beat it. So it's huge. He's the man who the EPL love to hate. He's the man who's probably won more cases against the EPL than anybody else. But this is the big one, and the one you should all be focused on. Is it straightforward to do this? No. Is it possible and doable? Yes. And you've got to a point now where you've looked at people in the game, and people are saying that the thing's foul, the thing's corrupt, the thing is, it's wrong. And once over, nobody on Sky TV or BBC would stand up and speak up. But Alan Shearer just has, and Gary Neville just has, and TalkSport Simon Jordan just has, and TalkSport's Graham Souness just has. So the press are starting to come round and realise there's a sham going on here, and it's wrong. And the best sports KC in the country, Nick DeMarco, is saying, I could argue that this doesn't work, and I could argue this is wrong. I speak to him, and I ask him questions, and I say to him, what's happened? And he said, the ante's been upped. The Premier League have upped the ante. The EPL are playing hardball now. So what you did during the takeover will never happen again. It's not my words. The panel of judges have told you that the Premier League will abuse their dominance and use numbers to beat you. And they'll act anti-competitively as they have with the loans. And they'll act unlawfully if they need to. You're against a really, really strong opponent who'll fight gritty and determined to get what they want. And they've already written roughshod over Everton, Forest, Leicester, Man City, Newcastle. And they've got Villa in the sights. And if Chelsea think they haven't got them in the sights, they should be mistaken. But in fact, it seems that the people who run the Premier League in power, it seems that though anybody that disrupts the family silver or wins competitions or wins league titles, are at risk. It seems though anybody competes with the cartel and takes one of those prized 5 places at the top of that league are at risk. Can you remember those 2 daft football fans that spent all that money building a case? Premier League went after them as well. But I'm still here. So what can they do? What can the Premier League do? They have enormous monies because they are the sum of 20 clubs. So think about if you take them on, they can just tell all 20 clubs, we've got a case here and we want a 20th of it coming in. So it's extremely difficult to take the Premier League on in monetary terms. They have written rules that only allow, the written rules only allow clubs to go to arbitration. The written rule doesn't allow them to go to a law court. So that nullifies the threat. It takes away the penalties that law courts give you. It doesn't give you what a competition court will give you. A competition court's penalties are massive. Nobody goes to a competition court unless they think they're going to win. And if they're not going to win, they settle and get out. And that's where the PSR needs taken. It needs to take it through a competition court. So whilst clubs are not allowed to take the Premier League to court, members of the public can. The only thing they've got to do, you might have heard it during the court case, because they said, oh, NCSL won't have standing, is what they, a lot of people yakkered on about that. And in the end, we gave our case to Newcastle United. And they just literally badged it up and went themselves. Knew that the case couldn't be beaten, and knew that the case of whether standing is whether I've got enough losses if the takeover didn't go through. But Newcastle could, without doubt, determine losses. So that it was straightforward that they would do it, and that's why they took our case on. So I've spoken to 3 barristers over the last 4 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. And in our layman's terms, they say that football fans have got standing now, and they've got no doubt. And you can guess. I mean, we're going to compromise who they were, but you can guess who one of them was. And they are satisfied that they've investigated and tested the legal argument as to whether football fans have standing or sufficient loss in a club, to the point where they could run an action against the Premier League for the not fit for purpose PSR, and they feel that that can be done. On the proviso, they said if fans raised $500,000, the Premier League would say we need £1 million worth of legal cover for you to run this case, so then you'd have to raise another $1 million. And if you raise that, they'd say our expenses have gone up, it's now $2 million. And they'll just keep gambling you out. And I think they do that with a small club as well. So to do this and make this work, you'd need the kind of people that stood up against APT. You'd need your Villas, your Newcastles, your Man Cities, your Forests. Or you'd certainly need a Newcastle or a Man City, that kind of ilk, to be able to run such a case.
Keith, I'm keen to get into the comments because we've got a lot of people asking questions, and we'll have to run through those quite quickly. But there's a few, if you can run through your final points.
I'll go on the final point is who would be the biggest winner if you ran an action? The biggest winner would be the owners of the clubs. The game's now about billions of pounds. It's not millions no more, so it's billions. If the Premier League would be told by barristers that the Premier League would stop any fans or fan running an action against them. And I spoke to a CEO of a national football organisation 3 weeks ago, and he said, what you did will never happen again because they've closed that door. I was told by a famous sports KC that things have gone up a lot in terms of money since I did it, and they will outbid us. So they said, you'll need a big backer. It would have to be the ilk of all of those clubs I've just mentioned. But to get that, you've got to get someone who's going to lose or gain. And if you thought if PSR was scratched, if you see the difference in the value in Newcastle's value would probably go from where it's currently sitting at about 800 or 900 million. And if PSR was scrapped, Newcastle would quickly be probably a £2 billion club. So that the benefit of Newcastle scrapping PSR would be massive. At the minute, it's like a game of three-card brag. Whoever's got the most money would be able to win a court case. But you need the evidence to do it. And if you haven't got as much as the Premier League's got, they're not going to let you run a case. Or their clubs who want to keep these rules in place are not going to let you run it. So what will happen is, if you don't run a case like this, it's going to be run in an arbitration. So if we don't change it, and going back to the takeover, if the takeover had gone through arbitration, Mike Ashley would still own Newcastle United. There'll be no PIF or Saudis. That was taken because a CAT case threatened the Premier League. So to get this to work and to get the PSR scrapped, you're going to have to get this into a law court, not in an arbitration. I don't know who runs Newcastle at the minute. I'm not sure who calls the shots. And when people come to us, they say, oh, PIF smashed the golf. But the difference was that was on their own soil. When they did the golf, that was on Saudi soil. They ran it. It was their whole everything. So that's why they put money in. But they paid the kind of money to players to transfer as what they paid for Newcastle United. So we're not going to get it. Some people think that some PIF companies are going to put 10 million quid sponsorship in, but no CEO worth the weight is going to blindly sponsor something unless they get more than 10 million to benefit out. So all that hope of where's the money and how much are they interested? They're very interested, but they need really to smash PSR before they can do this. So to conclude, and finishing off is we need big sponsors. We need a big stadium the size of what other people's got, and we need a big squad. We need a big squad of players. If you have a big squad of players, you don't compete on the pitch. So to do that, we have to tackle PSR. The barristers that we talk about are there, and they're ready and willing if appointed, and the evidence lies there in abundance. There's abundance of evidence that'll deliver what we want. The evidence was there when we ran it, and it's only grown considerably. So it's all there. And now's the time for the biggest benefactors, who were the clubs, to back the fans, or just agree they're going to work with a broken PSR. That's what they've got to agree. But I won't spend any more money. I won't plan, because it would be worthless. It would not equate anything. It's gone out of our leagues. So it's now the time for the clubs to decide what they want to do. The silence, if they don't do anything and they just sit silent, people are critical of the club, say, well, why haven't we done anything? They've got all the evidence they need now. They've got top KCs saying, I'll run your case. But to do that, they have to act. They have to take an action on. The last thing I'll say is the top and bottom of it all is now up to the club to confirm who's in charge, where they go. I think I'd like to see the club develop a stadium and decided kick open a door. There's a door there on PSR which is wide open. That door can be kicked open tomorrow, and if they do, the top Newcastle's most friendly barrister, the one who's worked for them before, is confident. He's telling you that they'll win a case. So it's now up to the club to say, well, we can't take an action. We could back fans to do it, and come together with Villa, Forest, and Man City, and they think they've won the APT. Go for the big one now and do PSR, because if you don't, there's going to be a lot more nights like West Ham nights than what PSG.
Quality again, Keith. It's been another marathon night. We're going to try and get through a few questions. Hopefully, a lot of that might have answered some of these. So if they have, we'll just quickly address them and move on. A little bit of a quick fire one, Keith. I know you might find that difficult with the way you like to speak, but let's get right stuck into it. and see what people have got to say. Is that the first one there, Dom? Of course, thanks to Dominic Sker in the background, putting all of the bits and bobs together tonight. Right, that's the first one from Ian CR65, Keith. Why would the Premier League push through latest amendments of APT before waiting for final determination from the tribunal? Why do you think they would do that?
Because they wanted to win. They'd lost at Leicester, they'd lost the APT first round, so they needed to win something, and they'd done it because they knew that that there's a risk if the Premier League lose the second APT vote, they're finished. I mean, that's 3 losses, and I think they've lost already when they've been proven to be unlawful. But I don't know. There's lots of rumours coming about what's going to happen with Man City with 115. Let's wait and see what happens. But the Premier League were told they acted terribly in the first round of APT. They tried to do a vote the following Monday. What were they going to vote on? Unlawful rules. I think there's sometimes Arsenal or Man United fans come on to me and say, and they come on and say, how could it be anti-competitive when there's a 14-6 vote? That's just crazy. So let's all gang up with Newcastle United, have a meeting against them, and then we'll have a vote to see if it stands. So they have a vote, 98-1 votes against Newcastle. There you go, it's fair. No, it's still illegal. So why did they do it? To get a win, I think.
So next one, cheers for that, Dom, from Kev Tay. Why aren't PIF going after this? Doesn't make sense for an organisation so big and powerful as PIF are to accept being treated like this. Our chairman even sat with Trump at the UFC. We must have clout. Thoughts, Keith?
Dead easy. We had no evidence until Man City ran the APT case of that meeting. We had no evidence we could quote or do, so they had to sit back and let somebody else do it. And then they gather evidence on that and then decide where they go. But we had no evidence at all. We weren't party to that meeting. We weren't invited. It was just all hearsay. It wouldn't count in the court. So I can see why they fully sat back and let somebody take the lead and agreed to support. But I don't think Newcastle could have run that case. Now, I'm with you. I asked the same question. Now you've got that evidence. What are you going to do with it? Evidence only lasts so long, and it only stays real. So for me, I can understand why they haven't done anything to now. If you ask why nothing's happened at the minute, things have changed at Newcastle. You know, the people I think were in charge, who you could go and speak to, and have left. And the person who was running it, we told her he's leaving. So who is going to be taking that mantle up? Because you've lost Amanda murdered, and Darren Neils will leave. New CEO comes in. Do you think he'll want the case? First job, first day at his desk. It's critical. All this time it's critical. But just because these changes happen doesn't stop people appointing people to do this. Because if Newcastle went in with 3 of the clubs or whatever and backed a fans action against PSR, the lawyers would run it. You know, DeMarco's team would run that.
I'm going to jump on this one, Keith. There's a question from Paul. Why isn't this debate in question by mainstream sports journalists? They must realise this is collusion. Look, I'm going to put my journalism hat on here, my journalist hat. Journalists very much deal in facts, and if facts aren't, or the evidence isn't presented directly on a journalist's desk, it's a very difficult one for anybody to challenge or write. There isn't a massive amount that you can write opinion pieces, and I think Keith has been very clever tonight in highlighting all of the opinion pieces, whether they be from Martin Samuel or whether it be from other people in the sports journalism sphere now, including Simon Jordan. But any normal journalist, unless they've got absolute undeniable evidence, which is very difficult sometimes in these cases to get, it's not really something you can just speculate on, given the amount of the high priority of this, the amount of people involved and the amount of money involved in these cases. So I would say it is a journalistic minefield is how I would probably answer that one.
The other thing I like to add to that is that a lot of media companies get paid, or they incentivize people on the kind of clicks they get. And so they want articles that get attraction. And when you've got to do what's called investigative journalism, where you've got to dig and work and do it, sometimes they don't allow them journalists to do that kind of work. They want to know who's injured, who's in, who's out, who they're buying. And sometimes they'll rumour monger a player that's not even being looked at to try and get interaction on that tweet. Sometimes they'll put an article out which winds people up. You've seen that. And that's just to get reaction. And they're seen as doing the job well, which I don't agree with. But when it comes to investigative journalism, Martin Samuel must have done it. And Nick DeMarco's commented on it. But what I do is I like a fly swatter, I knock all the stuff away that's just waffle made up. And when you get somebody, that's why I've grouped together all those people, because them people who are credible. Alan Shew's very credible. Simon Jordan's on a massive show. So see, they put the name on. Souness is on the same show. Gary Neville's on Sky. You know what I mean? I mean, if you listen to Gary Neville and listen to Jamie Carragher, you think they're off a different planet. Because Jamie Carragher comes out with the biggest load of shite I've ever heard in my life in terms of this competition law thing. It's as though it doesn't exist. It's as though Shearer and Nick DeMarco and everyone's making it up. And it's going on. He said this. He played a game 2 weeks ago and he says, "Oh, Newcastle want to get the Champions League, but they'll finish outside." It's November. What gives a journalist the right to say, or a pundit the right to say that? So I think when it comes to journalists, it's the written word. They've got to be more careful, as Liam says, and Liam showed me during the takeover. Every time I wanted an article to go out, Liam needed proof. He wouldn't put anything out unless he had hard, fast proof, and it was hard. And every time I got it, but and we were releasing everything that the club needed to get released to get the takeover done. But I don't blame the journalists so much. I blame the bosses of the journalists.
It can often be looked that way. I'm not going to get into that debate too much.
No, I don't want you to.
Move on to the next question. Right. Councillor Spenny. We'll keep this one quick because this could open a can of worms. Let's keep it short and sweet. What do you think of the independent football regulator that suggested amendments be discussed on Wednesday? I'm not a fan of this. So
it's a good point, because I was gonna cover it like earlier, but I just thought that the point we've got to cover is what's happened, what can we do about it, where can we go, and that's, I hope we've got there in the end. As far as the regulator goes, and it's the documents being circulated on social media, and in that, I mean, there's a lot of people scaremongering about it, saying what is the impact of that document. The document suggests that the regulator could put in a rule that says, for example, anybody with a wealth fund, i.e. us and Man City, might not get a license. For what a load of rubbish, honestly. And people are doing that. And you think about it, yes, the regulator could do it. Yes, they could turn around and say, anybody who wears black and white stripes isn't allowed to play in the Premier League. Of course, they can do whatever they want. But that won't make it work. And whoever tries those rules out, the route when you take a regulator on or take government on is through a judicial review. And the judicial review could be taken by any member of the public. And if that was to go in, if they were to put a rule in that said sovereign wealth funds aren't allowed to have a license, so many 100,000 people would object. And if you want to see what objections like, when people think, I was getting things this week that was saying, can you fill this out for a investigation or something? I don't know, the government. And I looked at it, it was 20,000. Last time I looked, it was 2.7 million people have said they want to have an inquiry into the government. And that's what the government face is. If they try and put a rule in which is blatantly unfair and discriminatory, it won't stand up, because they're taking the regulation on the Football League with 20 members and 2 of them have a wealth fund. So how can they make a rule up saying the can't have a wealth fund, which is what that whole thing is saying. Some people are saying, oh, they can do whatever they want, but yeah, they can, but they can be challenged on everything.
Next question. That was a good answer, Keith. What we got now? Any N9NE_NUFC. Thanks for your question, mate. With all this stuff about shareholder loans not being part of PSR, why on earth didn't we do that? Brighton did around 400 million. Now that door's closed, we just seem so slow to things like this. Was that a kind of workaround that was possible in Newcastle United, Keith?
When you turn around and say, I mean, I think it's a great point the lad raises, and I'm saying it could be a lady. I apologise for that, but it's a great point you raise. Could Newcastle do it? But don't forget that very rule was classed as being anti-competitive. So what you're saying is, why didn't we quickly be anti-competitive to be as bad as the rest? For me, I think you're better off just smashing the rules apart and just make a playing field where Shearer says, put your money in an escrow account, guarantee that the club's not going to go into bad hands. If PIF walk away, there's funds there for the spending they've done, or some system that allows Ipswich to get back to what they were when Bobby Robson was the manager. Why shouldn't they get back to that? Why shouldn't Blackburn Rovers come back to what Jack Walker was? Why is Leicester? Why is the documents in our takeover information about cartel behaviour where people were saying in the Big Six, we need to stop a Leicester ever happening again? And that was said amongst some of the owners, hugely cartel behaviour and anti-competitive. To ever have the neck or the balls to say that Leicester shouldn't be allowed to win the Premier League. That's what they were doing at the time, because it was scoff. It was damaging their family silver. And it was taking away what they thought was rightfully theirs, which are like these Champions League places. So then why would you then, if you're going to smash it and play with a clean straight back, which appears to be what Newcastle are doing, go and get 400 million of interest-free loans, which will remain anti-competitive as long as they exist? What I'm more concerned about is how they level that playing field and how they sort out the interest that the people have benefited from, or does it remain anti-competitive, and does the anti-competitive bit just stay with it? Because I think that in itself is a court action.
Just to add to what you were saying there, Keith, that's been my understanding from the very start. And Newcastle United will not bend the rules. They will do as the rules say, even if those rules as they stand aren't fair. They're not going to go down the route of trying to bend things. And look, as you say, it's probably the right way to go forward. What's the next question? You got any more questions in the chat, Dom? All right, we've got one here from Gary V. Loads of comments from him tonight. Cheers, mate. Keith, what would happen if a club broke its agreement with the Premier League and decided to bring an anti-competitive case outside of arbitration?
You can't. The simple thing is you can't. When you join the Premier League, one of the terms of joining is that you agree not to take any cases outside of arbitration. So when we did the takeover, when I first met Nick DeMarco, Shai Fatima, the lawyers, Justin Barnes, who ran it for Newcastle, they were going down the arbitration route. And I said, I think you'll lose. I think you'll lose on the 2-1 majority. And the reason is, in all arbitration, Gary, there's a panel of 3. You choose one, they choose one, and then you agree the third, and the third never gets agreed. It goes to the FA, who is the Premier League. Although sometimes I know they fight, but the Premier League, the FA will always side with the Premier League. And so you end up with a panel that's 2-1 against you as soon as you sit down. And that's what I said to you earlier, is if an arbitration decided to take over Newcastle, we would have lost either 3-0 or 2-1. That's what and the fortunate for me is the lawyers agreed with us. I did the talk, and then they asked me to bring in my barrister, who was a guy called Robert O'Donoghue. He's a silk top KC in competition law, and he came in and met Newcastle's team, Nick DeMarco and Shai Fatima, and he explained the competition action and why it was critical and why they wouldn't be able to defend the competition action. And it was Nick DeMarco, all credit in my eyes, who said to Newcastle United, "I think they're right. I think these people are right. I think that I think you will win the competition action, and the arbitration is full of doubt." So you haven't got that choice. And since the takeover, and since we did it, what Newcastle did was they used an associate company, which is called St. James Holdings, and they got them to run the action that I built. They ran that action. When that action was run, they couldn't stop St James Holdings, and St James Holdings it was a loophole that Ashley had. He had several companies. Since that time, the Premier League have rewritten the rules to stop those immediate associated companies that's connected with the club doing it. So I don't know what would happen if a sponsor was to run an action, but I know fine well from talking to the barristers that the public, fans, you can imagine if a guy had a hotel next to St James Park and Newcastle were relegated, his takeover would drop, and the cost per tickets would drop, and so he could justify that Newcastle going down would hurt his business. Then he's got what's called standing, or he's got loss. And what the barristers have found is that fans have loss. Fans would be able to justify that quite easily, and so the route for a club to take it, like Gary's saying, through a court, is to do it through their fans, but they couldn't do it themselves. Not allowed to.
Just for the question, Gary, what we got next on? Oh, here we are. John Ramsey, what will it take to make PIF and the Rubens fight back against the EPL and cartel and lawful rules and actions? I think we've kind of covered that one a little bit earlier, but is there anything you want to add on that one, Keith?
What if the Rubens fight back?
What will it take to make?
I think it's dead simple. I think the only way the Rubens and PF could fight it is to the open route, which barristers are saying would not be defended or would not be stopped. It wouldn't be blocked. They wouldn't be able to. Is if they supported a fan action.
John Allen.
John Justice Allen. How are you doing, me old pal?
Yeah. Friend of the channel as well. Good to see you in the comments, mate. Evening, everyone. Question for KP. Is the level of corruption even higher than what you expected when you first set out on this journey?
It's yeah, I thought it would be a lot easier. I thought that I didn't know what a troll was when I first started, so I didn't know that you get people building false identities. I didn't expect death threats. I didn't realize how much antagonism there was from people supporting little clubs down the road who were jealous. I didn't realize that the antagonism was from places like Qatar, how much they hated Saudi and how much they would put action. So it was hugely more contentious. But then I thought once you get past that, it's plain sailing. And then I met the Premier League, and the Christmas before the takeover, 23rd of December, 5:45 at night or something, we get like letters threatening to take our houses off us and threaten us to take our taking our underpants off us because we took an action against the Premier League and criticise us for things I was saying through Liam in the papers. It was vicious, but it was the last act of our friends at the Premier League before they left for Christmas. And I suppose it was supposed to ruin our Christmas because they were vicious then. And I had a right good drink that night. I thought, right, I've got under the skin. I can't believe that like fans have got them. But what's happened since then is they've realised that fans have played with them. They realised that we've got to take over. The people realised that if you read the points of our letter before action to the Premier League and then you read Newcastle's competition case, it's the same points. So they realise that it's one and the same, and they'll think, shit, we've got to stop that happening again. What they're doing it now with is money. And I think the clubs that stand to lose the most if PSR disappeared are the clubs that are prepared to put the most in. So it's vicious. And I think what happened with Leicester was all wrong. I think that was really harsh. And I think what happened with Everton was wrong. The speed they dealt with, Everton, and they went at them twice, and then the way they went with Forest. It's as though the Evertons and the Forests don't count because they've got their big guns aimed at Man City, and then when they get Man City out, it'll be Newcastle, and I'd say that it'll be Chelsea and Villa. That's where I see it. And but I think when you look at those clubs, I think that there's a group that's getting bigger people that's had enough. And I think now let's get into press. When you've got lawyers coming forward with comments, and you've got journalists like Samuel coming out with an article as well written as what he did, I think the tide's turning, and I think that APT has just been had its face slapped for trying these ridiculous Newcastle rules. They've been backheeled. I think the next one's PSR. When that happens, I think it's game over. I think when that happens, I think you will be able to compete with everybody.
Always good to have John in the comments. Thanks for your comments tonight. This is the one we're going to wrap up with, Keith, because there's a few other comments in there, but they're all along similar lines that we've already addressed. And Jack comes here just in at the last minute. Jack at the back post comes in with this one, and he's asked, is it possible to crowdfund for fans to take the Premier League to court? Seems like a very appropriate one to ask someone like yourself.
The answer, Jack, is yes. Of course it can be done, and there's two ways to look at it. Yes, but whatever you got in there, it's publicly announced what you've got in. So it'll go 10,000, 20, you'll go to 100 grand, 150. You know how it works. And then the Premier League will be sitting watching it. They'll be watching all the time. And what they'll do is they'll justify costs that dwarf that. So they'll say, oh, they're 200,000 now. So make sure, and they'll just go, they'll put in an order before the case runs, or they employ their lawyers to defend it. That the people who've only raised 220,000 need to come up with 2 million or something of that nature. So that's why the barristers are saying to me that you wouldn't crowdfund such an action, because when you crowdfund something, you're limited. But where it would work, Jack, is if you did a crowdfund and then somebody from Abu Dhabi put in, 5 million, and then somebody from Riyadh put in 3 million, and somebody from Birmingham put in 2 million, and all of a sudden you could be there with an agreement that if any of these funds weren't used, they're refunded. That could be part of your crowdfunding. So you could do it by that method, but it would need an enormous amount of administration and financial diligence to run those kind of numbers. And for me, if I were ever involved in that, I would rather we had the backing. So when I did mine, we put our own funds in ourselves, but if it had gone to court, the money would have gone up considerably. It had gone from 6 figures to 7 figures, and we had a backer. If it got messy, that would do that. And I think that's what's needed in this case. I think that crowdfunding's good and it gets a lot of cheering and all the rest of it, but you're playing with billionaires and you're probably collecting thousands. That's why it wouldn't work.
Right. Your Geordie Journos resident legal APT, PSR, whatever you want. Keith Patterson.
I'm retiring.
2 hours again on the Geordie
It's 2 hours
Journos.
again. Good God. But I mean, it's I can't thank like the match last night. It was an Irish centre, sport of 3 lads, and they were just brilliant. I can't thank people enough, but I am going to say this, is that like I'm done with all this, because I'm as daft a fan as you'll ever meet. I like the laugh, and I like the drink, and I like to go to the match, and I just like seeing Newcastle win. But this is out of my league now. This is do Newcastle want to be like a Brentford and a Wolves and a Fulham and just plod on like they did in the Ashley days, or do Newcastle want to I don't know, have a 2 billion, 3 billion worthy company? And if they do, there's a route to do it. You need to go out, you need to get hold of Nick DeMarco, and he'll tell you exactly how to do it. And
that's your next task then, Keith. Get a hold of him.
No, I can get hold of him easy. I mean, I talk to him regularly. But what I'm saying is he'll say if he tweets us, he always puts it in, cheers, mate, or whatever. Like, I'm friends with him, and I was at Wembley, and he come down and got us in the street, and there's a photograph out there on the media with it. He's a great bloke, like a cracking bloke, and but above all, he's a football fan. He's a massive QPR fan. At the end of the case, he sent me a letter, which I've always kept private, I've never published. And he just said, from a QPR's point of view, I can't thank you for what you did, because he says you went way above and beyond. But I know I made their job easier by doing what I did, because I had the Premier League cornered, and the evidence I've got, and that it's in 6 lawyers' offices now around the country that will always remain. It has a lifespan on it, but there's a lot of it's existing work, and they're still doing it now. They're still committing silly own goals. To seriously, I can't tell you how having a meeting about one competitor where 19 turn up and he's not invited is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. It's ridiculous. It's just incompetence personified. And if that's how bad your people are at the Premier League, then give me £1 million a year and I'll come down and I'll make it rock solid so people can't do that. But you do these things and you Newcastle rules. The fact they call the Newcastle rules, shame on you for being so incompetent that you run a set of rules. But to me, the Premier League stunk the day I met it. It stinks more tomorrow. And I can't wait until it becomes a fair organisation. And I can't wait until it becomes fair and that the club is allowed to compete and invest in its own model. This club and every other club, why shouldn't that guy at Notts Forest, that guy at Notts Forest is a great example then, Don. That guy was penalised for trying to keep his team in the Premier League, right? So he's penalised. If he never spent the money, he went down and he stayed up by one place by spending the money. And for spending the money to save him by one place, he got fined for spending too much money. If that's not anti-competitive, that's not unlawful, and the teams who second and third and fourth, they all sit and looking down and go, oh, fine them, take the court, and they keep throwing you under the bus and charging it. So to me, what I say is, I'll say that the Evertons, I'm pleased to get new owners because I think they'll come now. Villa, Forest, Man City, Newcastle, they're the clubs who want to have a crack. When Gary Neville and them say Newcastle will never be able to compete with Man City, that's a Man United supporter. Christ, what world do we live in? So we either going to have more nights like last night, or we're going to be able to invest in our model, which you're allowed to in any market in Great Britain. You're allowed to invest in your model without. Think about the other one, sponsors. Your competitors decide how much people are allowed to sponsor you. In terms of sponsorship is worth what the person wants to pay. That's the reality. What's this sponsorship worth to you? And that's the way it should be. But the whole thing stinks. And all I'm saying is I'm dropping out now. You'll see less and less of me because I'm done. I just think that the only way you're ever going to get a flat playing field is when PSR is broken, and it's the most fractious and most available challenge there is. PSR is there now, ready to be broken, and it can be broken, and there is a route, and I've explained it. And there's people way bigger, more important than me at these big clubs can go out now and do whatever they want to do, but the route's there. If they don't do it, it means they don't want to do it.
Right, on that note, I've got to say, Keith, you make this easy for me. It's probably the quietest 2 hours I've ever had on this channel, because I'm just sitting here listening to all your expertise and everything that comes along with it. You make this job easy for me. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. I want to make sure that I do mention for Rivers Financial Planning, there could be some quite interesting sponsorship news towards the end of the week as well, which we're waiting on. There's also, I want to make sure that if you did like what we do, like, comment, share, subscribe, click the bell for all your Geordie Journos content. Of course, there is the chance to get involved with super thanks as well. So any donations, massively welcome. There is a little button below here where you can get involved with that. I want to say a massive thank you, as I'm sure everybody else does. First of all, to Dominic Skur for staying with us all night when me and Keith have a chat all night and getting all of the documents in at the correct times and in the correct order.
I'll stay on after to talk to you and Dominic for 5 minutes.
Yeah, perfect, mate. We'll stay on. Yeah. And then also the comments section as well, running that and putting comments in there. Of course, you can find out the shop. There's a little ticker along here saying check out the new Geordie Journos shop if you like this kind of thing. It is available. Nice Christmas present for your other half, maybe, or whatever it may be. Here you are. Get the mugs. They're quality. They're mugs, the double-sided mugs. Get involved. So there is shop. Super thanks. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And of course, I'm sure you'll be able to catch. We'll maybe try and get Keith out of retirement at some point again in the future. But he may have retired after another long shift that he's put in on the Geordie Journos. We'll have to just play that one by ear. Any final words from you, Keith?
What I want to say to everyone is thanks. Thanks for when I see you outside, and thanks, honestly. The people, you treat us great, and I'm humbled by how kind people are to us. But don't get us wrong. You can see me dislike for anti-competition. You can see me dislike. It's followed through my career for 15 years of work. But if Man City or Newcastle pick the phone up, I'll be there like a bat out of hell. I'll walk up. I'll walk to Man City. I'll get push bike out, pedal down, because just to make sure that they go the right route. Because we had a football club that wouldn't have had a takeover if they didn't go down the competition route. So I'd happily give time to a football club of that ilk that was going to fight it, but and then take a back seat. You know what I mean? Because I just would like to see an organisation level this playing field. But thanks everyone, because you won't understand how much I do appreciate the kindness I've had and gifts and everything. It's been phenomenal. It's been a phenomenal just journey, just doing it. It's I don't know why the hell I did it, but I've got to say, like, I've learned a lot, and it's just it could only have been Newcastle United, couldn't it? It's the only thing that would make you work for 14 months without wages and stick a crazy amount of money into a cause, really. But thanks a lot. Thanks to the Geordie Journos for giving us the platform, and for being able to dip out with me head held high.
Always, Keith. Always a pleasure to have you on. And as long as you want to be here, you're always welcome on the Geordie Journos, as you know. Right. Good night. Good night from the Geordie Journos. Good night from Dom. I'll have to speak for him. He can't speak for himself. Good night from Keith, and it's good night from me. Thank you, everybody, for being involved tonight. Like, comment, share, subscribe for all your Geordie Journos content. Cheers, guys.
Cheers, lads, lasses, kids.